Today's poker hand comes from Triton, $50,000 buy-in tournament, where we are left with 7 players and its futures one of the best Thailand's poker player Bunat Bunzri and legendary Phil Ivey, where 7 players remaining, 2 million for first, so let's jump into the action. So, Brian Gim, let's it go. Michael Watson, let's it go. Michael Soisa, our short stack with 12 big blinds. We'll let it go. There is no playing. Jack 3 is suited. And now we have an action on 25 big blind stack on the god off with ace 8-0. I would assume, even though you're in the middle of a back, you're still good to open it, even though you do have a chip leader, basically first, second, and third stacks behind you. You probably still find open ace 8-0. I don't think you can open all the offsuit ace 6, but I do think this one is good. And then Lin thinks about it and lets it go. Sergio 650, our chip leader, lets it go as well. So it's folded to Bunat on the small blind, who's 13 chips with 28 big blinds, and Ivy has 34 big blinds, who's second in the with chips. So Bunat over here has interesting decision. I do believe you get to play some opening strategy over here. It's not purely a limp only strategy. Sometimes you do see limp only strategy, but I don't think this is going to be one of those spots because there is no super short stack, so to speak. So if you want to build a raising range, your raising range will be top of your range, and then it will be bottom of your range. Some suited hands do come in, like 10-3 suited. You can raise like small suited king x, suited queen x, suited 3 gappers, 2 gappers, smaller ones. So you do build your range around there. So I don't think it matters what type of action he's going to choose over here. So Bunat goes ahead and raises to almost 3.5x over here, 675,000. And for Phil, I think it's kind of simple decision over here to just call, and you could be seeing some little bit mixing to 3 bets and stuff like that, but with these stacks I do think you mostly want to call 3-bet a little bit worse than King Jack O over here. And he does make the call, and we are going to take a flop over here. So flop comes Queen of Hearts, Den of Spade, and Ace of Diamond. And action on Bunat. With the bottom pair over here, you do want to probably just mostly go for a check. Sometimes maybe bet, but like for the most part, you don't mind to go for a showdown. You should beat quite a bit of Ivy's hands at this point. And Bunat does and check it to Ivy. So Ivy has the nuts, right? If you have the nuts, typically you want to start betting, especially with ICM. You do play way more often fast play, so to speak, with your very strong hands, like the nuts. That doesn't really have any like blocking effect. So if you had ace-x, you probably want to bet. If you have nuts, you want to bet. 2 bears, you want to bet. So I like the small bet sizing. I do think Bunat can definitely still have like a couple of ace kings, ace jack, maybe ace 9, ace 8 type of like 2 bear like ace queen, pocket 10s, pocket queens that slow plays. So for that reason, I do like the small bet size over here. So Ivy goes ahead and bets 2 big blinds, very small bet size over here on the flop. As Punat, I do think you just want to call here. You have backdoor flush draw, you have a bottom pair, you still beat the bluffs, and the bet size was so small. So turn, Jack of Hearts gives Punat a flush draw, and not the greatest card for Ivy over here in terms of his hand, but Ivy does have still the nuts. But Buna can also have the nuts now because Ivy bet so small on the flop. Buna can also have some straights over here because if you have King high, your Buna Ivy bet like 2 big blinds on the on the flop, you most likely going to call most of those king highs, maybe not all of them, but most of them. So Bunat is definitely going to have a lot of straights here as well. But if you're Ivy, I think you just want to keep barreling. Bunat can also have a lot of like weaker ace-x, some two pairs, some queen x, jack x. His range is still like a lot of one pair type of hands. And for Ivy, if you're Ivy over here, Jack does help with your flop bluffs. So now you're gonna have a lot more pair of jacks. You're gonna have a lot more straights, because if Ivy had just a king high, he would go and start betting those on the flop. So Ivy's bluffs on the flop will improve on the turn, and typically that would mean you want to continue quite a high frequency as in position player over here, because well, your bluff's connected, so why not continue? So I would like to see mostly a continue from Ivy, maybe sometimes check the nuts, but I'm not that big of a fan of that. But in solver world, you're probably okay if you start checking nuts here sometimes. But yeah, so let's see what Ivy does, and it goes check check. Ivy chose to go for a check. So on the river, Bunat has a decision over here. So first of all, if I'm Bunat, if you think Ivy is mostly betting King X, then it's going to be hard to get value from much. Or like, not, Ivy should still call you with one pair hands if you bet very small. Ivy can still have some flushes, that's possible. So if I'm Bunat, I kind of think this is excellent spot to go and bet small. Good trap here sometimes, but for the most part, I would like to see very small bet over here, get some value, because Ivy's checking range on the turn should be kind of queen x, some like flush draws, some ace x maybe. But I do think like against such a range, you kind of want to bet small. I think you get to size too big, because Ivy is still gonna have a lot of flushes. I think Ivy should have that many not straights, so king x can still have a couple of 8x, so small straights. So I do think betting small would make a lot of sense here. I don't mind the check here, but what will Ivy bluff? So if you don't expect Ivy would bluff you, you should kind of bet yourself and get some value. So Punat decides to go check, so it must be a check raise in his mind. So action on Ivy. So if we think about Punat's pre-flop range, Punat's pre-flop range shouldn't be too many suited hands. Maybe king 2 suited, king 5 suited, stuff like that. Maybe some like 8-5 of hearts, but those are not going to call you on the flop bet, right? So Puna can only really have then deuce, then 3, then 4, then 5, and couple of like ace x and suited king x. And he had a chance to bet himself on the turn or like on the river. So if I'm Ivy, my thought would be like, Punat shouldn't really have a flush here. Best Punat can have is probably a king x, quite a bit of maybe 8x, if we think of ace 8, queen 8, and 10 8, jack 8 maybe. But like, for the most part, I kind of feel like Bunat's range will be king x, a lot of like one pair, two pair hands, maybe some sets that decided to slow play. So if I'm Ivy, I do think you just want to get the value, and because I don't think Bunat will be having too many flushes played like this, I think Ivy should be sizing large here. So for the most part, probably around 2 million is what I'm thinking. Maybe it's slightly smaller, but somewhere near there would be the sizing choice over there. So Ivy goes ahead and bets 800,000. So very small bet size. So I don't like it. I don't think it makes sense. If you think Punat can really don't have much flushes, I just think you have the basically the nuts. Yes, sure, Punat will sometimes trap you, but sometimes is not enough for you to start sizing down. Only hand I can think of that you would maybe want to size like this would be some 8x to get called from like two bare hands, or like ace x. But other than that, it doesn't really make too much sense to go this small. And in general, if you're in position player, you're not supposed to be betting under half pot. That is like generally speaking. There are spots though. So action on Bunat. And I think Bunat has very clear option over here. Bunat should just go all in because Ivy should still call with the king highs. Also, I don't think Ivy would bet 800,000 with the flush here. It's possible, but I think it's very unlikely. I think Bunat has basically always the nuts over here. And also, you do, even let's say Ivy did that with like some small flushes, you do beat those. So I kind of do feel like Bunat should just go all in here. So let's see what Bunat does over here. So Bunat gives it a little thought. Always wise on this type of a spot to use a time bank, and like whenever you play these type of spots, you should understand this is not a simple spot or situation, board run out and all of that. It actually takes a lot of mental like power to figure out how to play these spots, what are the ranges. So you should always take time here, I kind of feel, unless you have like autofold or something like that. And Bunat goes ahead and bets 3.4 million, leaving 6 big blinds, 1.2 million behind. So it's not exactly all in. I guess he's doing this because he kind of wants to remain in the tournament in case Ivy has the better hand, but I don't think that makes too much sense. Could be. So over here now, if you're Ivy, so Ivy's thought process should go to pre-flop now, right? Because what flushes can Bunat have? Because if Bunat doesn't have a flush, then you have the nuts, right? So Ivy's thought process will go deep into, well, I have a king of hearts, so Bunat had to be slow playing some ace x with a heart. How likely is ace deuce to ace 9 of hearts to really raise with these stack depths pre-flop? I think it's kind of unlikely. Maybe ace 9 maybe. But Bunat can have ace 10, I guess. Ace jack can be. And ace king. Those are two ace x flushes. And Bunat can now also have some... does Bunat open king jack of hearts? Probably not. Does Bunat open like then deuce of hearts, then three of hearts, then four, five of hearts? Well, probably he should. And he does open smaller, like 8-5, maybe 7-3, 7 deuce of hearts. But those are not going to call the flop bet. So in Ivy's mind, especially if blocking king of hearts, because let's say Bunat could be opening king deuce to king 5 of hearts, you do block those, right? And if you go back to the flop, on the flop, you can definitely think like, hey, I bet 2 big blinds. So if I bet 2 big blinds, Bunat is most likely going to call a lot of king x over here, right? So would king x take this raising line, right? Because if Bunat has a king and raises, I can go and just split it up, right? So in Ivy's mind, it must be, it shouldn't really have too many flushes, like very few. Should he like take a line with the king like this? I think this is kind of what goes on in Ivy's mind right now, because it's not a simple spot to go for a call, because it's unlikely he's bluffing, right? And whenever it's unlikely he's bluffing, you don't really need to call. Problem for Ivy over here is he probably gets a split enough. Uh, he probably gets a split enough of the dimes to make still a call over here, but it's very difficult for like what is Bunat's bluffs going to be. It probably must be some 10x, right? Maybe 10-7-0. Some other, like if he's going to have then deuce, then 5 suited and stuff like that, he probably has clubs and diamonds and stuff like that as well. So those could come in mind to actually come played as bluff. Maybe some jack X, some suited jack X as well. But other than that, I don't think Punat actually really needs that many bluffs over here because it doesn't really have that many value, right? And it's very questionable. Will Punat really raise with king over here? So that must be what Ivey is thinking about over here. So let's see if the legendary Phil Ivey can figure this one out because, well, you play live poker, there are live reads, so let's see what happens. And Ivy does go ahead and click the call button. Unfortunately, he is receiving bad news. Pune did have then 3 of hearts, so Ivy did lose this one. But hey, if you guys want to see more of me, subscribe to my channel and check out one of these videos, and I'll see you there.